Well, this is the women's panel, and we have two men that have decided to appear by Zoom. My name is, it's true. My name is Meris. I am the CEO of a Canadian-based company based in Vancouver, British Columbia, and I commute between Boca Raton and Vancouver. I'm a little bit in the disruptive side of healthcare. Our company invests in psychedelics, medical cannabis, and medical CBD. It's all science-backed, data-driven, so we're on the medical side. But what I'm going to do, because we're a very eclectic panel, and I tried to write bios for each one, but it was all over the place. So I'm going to let each one introduce themselves. I think we'll start with Daniella, if you could introduce yourself, please.
Thanks very much, Meris. Daniella Kranjac. I'm a founding partner at Dynamk Capital. Is the sound okay back there? Okay, great. So Dynamk Capital is a life sciences venture and growth equity fund. We're entirely focused on the picks and shovels of biotech. It's kind of an interesting niche, but basically we invest in the innovation and the technologies that biopharma rely on, whether they're discovering, developing, or manufacturing therapeutics, cell and gene therapies, vaccines, diagnostics, what have you. So it's a very niche strategy. We're a team of operators. Our fund one, total firm AUM right now is 65 million. We're about fully deployed on our fund one, starting to conceptualize our fund two, and we've got a team of 6 at the moment, including venture partners and associates. We're based in New York, and with partners in Germany and Seattle, we've got good coverage globally.
JP Morgan's called her fund the life science industrial leader right now in the industry. So we're going to defer now to John. John,
yeah.
are you there? So John's big claim to fame is he's an All-American athlete, a Washington League general. That was that was my highlight. So go ahead and introduce yourself as the founder and managing partner at JAM.
Sure, absolutely. Can everybody hear me okay, first of all?
Perfect.
Great. Yep, so John McCallum here. Apologize, I couldn't be there in person. I was planning to and had to make a last minute call. We had a family, unfortunately a family death, but an uncle that lived to 90, so he had a great life. But appreciate everybody being here. Thanks, Marty, for putting this on and inviting me. So I run JAM Capital Partners. We're a growth equity shop in the lower middle market focused on principally medical technology investing. We also do some stuff in specialty materials the specialty materials play, working on substituent chemicals, green chemicals for traditional, non-green petrochemicals, and touch on some other things, but mostly in medtech. Started my career working for the Speaker of the House in Washington, D.C., doing budget, tax, and banking matters. I then got in kind of operator world and raised some money to start a SaaS company. I went back to graduate school at Harvard and was hired by Goldman Sachs after school, worked there for a number of years, and I spun out 11 years ago to start JAM, again, with a focus on medical technology investing in the lower middle market about 11 years ago. So that's a little bit about my background.
I guess we'll go right to Marie, to my left. Go ahead, Marie.
Hi, good morning, guys. I guess it's still morning.
I'm asking you to speak up because the audience is speaking.
Okay, yeah, okay. Hi, my name is Marie Knight. I am managing partner of Dragon Point Capital. It's just it's a family office, but I also do due diligence. I consider myself an analyst. I've been in the position, I started out as an analyst on Wall Street. I was a sell side analyst. And from there, I ended up going into, it's kind of an interesting background, I would say, a little bit different, going into competitive intelligence for the pharmaceutical industry. So I have a lot of different contacts, a lot of different interests. I have a bit of a Chinese wall based on what I do. But I do due diligence and consulting in the health sciences.
I don't believe Patrick has been able to log on. So we're going to begin. Basically, our topic was Healthcare 2022, the outlook. Our top, here we go. Our topic was Healthcare Outlook 2022. And despite the disruptions in the industry, healthcare is one of the top soaring spaces and sectors right now in the public markets and in the venture markets. Basically, it teetered off because there weren't as many clinical trials and not as many mergers and acquisitions. But now with the resumption of clinical trials globally, we feel it's going to go as high as it was in 2018. Analysts basically say that the projected strong growth for pharma bio industry will beat the fintech industry this year. So what we're going to start off with is basically there were 72 IPOs in 2020. Sorry, there were 71 IPOs in 2020. In 2021, thus far, there's 72 IPOs, except for the fact that 36 of them are down from their opening price. All the valuations are up in the sector. So irregardless of COVID, the sector is back. So our first question is going to go right to the capital markets, right to the venture side. And since we have an eclectic panel, you'll get different answers. And it's basically going to be, what do each of you feel is the best fundraising product or avenue for a healthcare company in the capital markets today, or a private company? So Daniella, you can answer to the industrial side if you'd like to.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think maybe taking a step back, certainly the lion's share of capital invested is going to the biotech sector. Biotechnology itself garners a lot of the attention, understandably so. But when you really look at the details around that sector, there's really very few investments that return the 10 to 20x. It's really a much more binary investment strategy. Whereas looking at something what we focus on, life science industrials, is the core underpinnings of biopharma. Again, regardless of whether they're successful in their therapeutic and reaching regulatory approval, or if they're not successful in reaching regulatory approval, they're still using all of those tools, technologies, and software, even AI and machine learning. In terms of fundraising avenues, I think one thing that we've observed, certainly the valuations are tracking up in the sector. That has been the case for the last several years, maybe encouraged by COVID to some degree, but we see that really as a sustainable long-term recognition of the value of the industry, even post-COVID, as we move past all the variants and Omicron and Delta and so on. We see that the sector is really addressing this gap of people wanting to live longer, healthier lives. And, the reality is this doesn't go away with COVID. This is just further reinforced. Diabetes, cancer, heart disease, psoriasis, arthritis, all of the disease trends that we're experiencing here in the US go globally. And, this is really about making healthcare more accessible, more widely available to patients in need, whether those are curative therapies or whether those are really life-enhancing therapies. And I think what's really interesting is as we look back, pre-1990, the biotech and life science industrials industries were really not very existent, really non-existent. Pre-1990, you're talking about only basically insulin, factor VIII, and human growth hormones. Now you're talking about huge efforts being made in cell and gene therapies, and those are requiring novel technologies to meet those demands to get to patients. So what we're seeing is the valuations trending higher in the public markets is certainly informing the private markets. But we still see a lot of value in terms of those private market opportunities before they reach the growth stages and before they're sort of targets for acquisition and exit.
We're going to defer to you, John. I'm going to ask you a little bit of a different question. Besides what facility or what exact avenue you think is helping as far as the investment tools, what do you think of SPACs in the healthcare industry right now, which have become a top raiser as far as one of the largest ones just went out in August, and they were targeted towards healthcare.
Yeah, there's been so a few things. Just echo what Danielle was talking about. I think this infrastructure play, whether it's the CRO world, or the manufacturing world, like she said, the picks and shovels, I think is a very interesting play. All of these biologics have to be scaled and manufactured somewhere. A lot of them are outsourced. People don't have the capital, and don't want to invest capital and CapEx to scale, the manufacturing side of the house. So I think there's big opportunities there. There are more development shops or technology shops. So there's a lot of interesting opportunity in the kind of infrastructure side of the genetic and biologics revolution that's taking place, which is, I think, also just echo something Daniella said, is really, the follow on of kind of what's happened with Moore's law and technology generally, right? Moore's law and healthcare intersecting. And so the power of the chip and what the chip has done for technology, manufacturing, all these sectors is now bleeding into healthcare. And, I think we're going to see the same kind of technology explosion, and we are in healthcare, that we've seen in software and other places. So I think there's a lot of interesting angles there relative to, I'll just talk about private markets. I'll get to your question, Meris, on SPACs. We play specifically, biotech is the lion's share of the IPOs, as Daniella shared, medical technology. So think about that as more mechanical interventions, regenerative medicine, machinery, dialysis machines, et cetera, is a much smaller segment of healthcare. But also has had incredible returns. It is not binary, but the requirements of those kind of businesses are much different. And that's where we like to play, where there's more of a less of a regulatory or trials approval binary outcome. Like, look, you don't know till the end of phase 3 if you get approved, and you don't know if it works till the end of phase 3, and you got to invest $200 million to get to the finish line. That's a hard road. In medical technology, the approval pathways are much less. They're less stringent generally, not always, but generally less stringent. They don't require the same kind of trials that a biologic requires. And so that's why we like the space, but it provided some incredible returns. If you look at Outset Medical, went public last year, you look at Inari, which went public, right at the end of the first few months of the pandemic, at a couple, 300 or 400 million value, is now trading at kind of 4.5 billion. You look at Penumbra, as an example of one from 4 or 5 years ago, and there's others, right? So we like to play in that space. I think there are tons of opportunities in the growth equity world, investing in these, I'd say, lower risk, higher visibility outcomes in medical technology companies, not quote unquote biotech companies. And then in SPACs, SPACs have gotten more and more active in healthcare in terms of SPAC capital raising. Healthcare is probably the second or third largest segment of SPAC money. It's still small, relatively speaking. There's been some big ones. The SPAC market obviously has, been really tough and nearly impossible as of late. People are still getting them public, but the indigestion happening in that market is pretty painful in terms of repricings, and things people are having to do to kind of reevaluate valuation ranges and how you get things out the door. We've looked at a couple SPACs for different companies we're in, and because of all the indigestion in the market, haven't been able to, to pull off, being a part of one or merging any of our companies with one. I think it's here to stay. It's going to be a big part of the future of, I think, healthcare investing. We just got to get through this tough period of the hangover from everybody and their brother starting a SPAC in the last 2 years, and we'll get through it as a market. I think there's still an opportunity. We're actually, one of our companies is talking to a SPAC, as we speak. So I think it is a definite angle. It's definitely here to stay as a part of a path to a liquidity event for biologic for biotech companies and medical technology companies alike, as well as software plays and healthcare.
You basically touched on our next question, which is more towards the area that you're in, which is basically healthcare is a big word. And there's 2 new players surging into 2022 that we all have to attach ourselves to. There's the medical technology, there's the life life science industrials, but then there's the wellness discovery deals, and there's the medical, and there's more medical AI. And the wellness industry has barged into this industry, becoming a huge part of the global healthcare sector. We didn't want to attach ourselves to it because cannabis is not a federally regulated drug in the United States, but cannabis, psilocybin, psychedelics, MDMA, LSD, ketamine, they're all become mainstream topics, and they're taking money out of the mainstream of healthcare in the United States. And they're becoming some of the biggest players in Canada, in Europe, and some of the family offices. Ironically, the largest group of investors in the psychedelic industry are American family funds, which people don't want to approach, or people don't want to talk about that much. So basically, unicorn healthcare startups are becoming more and more frequent again. Capital market darlings with huge upside in their shares prices. We're seeing incredible innovation, a huge breakthrough in technology, science. It's not unusual now to encounter a new deck, a new idea, fantastic groundbreaking startups with no potential revenues for years to come. And, listing to NASDAQ with family offices and institutional funds to back them. One such company should be listed this week. It's got a valuation of 620 million. It's out of Asia and Australia, no revenues, all funded by an American investment bank. So my question here is, tell us the kind of healthcare investments that you focus on in your portfolio, or your due diligence on in your portfolio, because healthcare is now a huge industry. It's not just regular pharma drugs. And we all have to realize that the money coming out of your family offices and venture funds are going in all different directions. So Marie, that's.
Well, based on a little bit the prior discussion and talking about technology a little bit, medical technology, and I was interested in what Deanna had to say about this as well, is I'm a skeptic. I tend to be more of a short seller. So we do a long short fund. And that's where a lot of my due diligence jobs have come in, is being more the skeptic. And I'm worried when I see some of these technology companies, or what they call technology companies. And for example, there's a new term coming out from Goldman Sachs, and I think it's kind of interesting, bringing together technology and healthcare. And they're going to have something coming up, I think, next week. And they call it biteology. So your ology, of course, is having to do with medical and whatnot, but there's a bite. So biteology, I think it's kind of interesting. But I'm skeptic of it. I think you see the SPACs, some of the SPACs that have been put together to bring this to market, and some of them have been falling apart, as we've talked about. And so I tend to be much more skeptical about it. But they're on the other hand, I mean, there's definitely some opportunities, but you have to be careful about what you're looking at. So what I've seen categorized, and again, that's what I'm kind of interested in definitions a little bit of exactly what we're talking about. So when we talk about AI, for example, what exactly are we talking about with AI? I think there's some opportunities and some places to be cautious. And I was on Wall Street during 1999 going into 2000, so we know what happened then. And I see a little bit of a replay of that. So I really, really am very careful in my investing, I guess I'm going to say, or I take opportunities on the other side of it. But I would say, so when we're talking about AI and technology, for example, and this hope of biology or the big data, I think there's opportunities in clinical trial design, but you have to be careful on how that's being managed. I guess a lot of them are, not actual. They're virtual offices. I'll say it that way. But there is opportunity, and especially like if you look in the cardiovascular space, there's a real need to develop better clinical trials, and that can be funded. That's the biggest problem. How do you fund these large trials? How do you get these new molecules to the clinic? That's going to take a long time, based on essentially what we're trying to move towards. And it's already in there from the FDA, but it has to do with surrogate endpoints, and Bayesian trial design. So there's some real interest from the pharmaceutical companies to be able to use that kind of, I guess, biology when we're talking about big data for clinical trial design. But I think, on valuation point, you have to be careful on, there's a lot of excitement for it. There's a lot of opportunity for it. But I almost look at it more as a tool for the pharmaceutical industry to use to bring their potential drugs to market, or a different path to market that's a little bit more financially viable. And then on the other hand, the other kind of big data that's talked about, and this is where I get a little bit more skeptical, is platforms. And I see that a lot. And I saw that a lot in the 90s, is these platforms that are being sold or promoted. But when you go down and you get do the due diligence, it sounds good, but when you do the due diligence, what is it really? Is it anything more than what they're already doing in the big pharma? It really isn't. So it sounds good, you can be confused by it, but what does it really bring? And I've seen that with some of the SPACs and some of the companies. So I don't know, it's more skeptics.
John, it's what do you focus on in your portfolio? I know you're very focused on AI and machine learning with some of the companies. So maybe you could highlight one or two of those companies for us, because that's
Actually, no, yeah. So I'd say we've got some stuff we've looked at in the world. I think, again, what we more focus on is kind of, we're big in regenerative medicine. There's some angles to that in what we do, but frankly, not a ton. And into cardiovascular and neurovascular, again, and I think, as everybody knows, in healthcare, interesting, it's 20% of the US economy, the global economy. It's got its own percentages in different markets. This is the biggest sector of the US economy. It is not going anywhere. It is only growing, as was articulated. Diabetes is not going away. Stroke is not going away. Aneurysm is not going away. Cardiovascular disease is not going away. And other disease categories. So these things, they are, the biggest payer is the federal government and insurance, right? So these things are here to stay. They're massive, massive markets with a ton of technological development taking place across the board. We play more in regenerative medicine and some mechanical and orthopedic spots than, I'd say, like I said, biotech. A couple, as examples of things we've done, we're in a company called Vivex, which is actually, also unhappy I couldn't get to Miami, where our business is headquartered in Miami. It's a regenerative medicine play, right? That, and has been said here, kind of along the risk reward spectrum. We're not trying to go out and take, white paper sheet risk, right? Like, hey, somebody's got an idea on a piece of paper and let's go hope that it works out. We're really growth guys, right? We're trying to find companies that have revenue, that have a real product, people that understand, the approval paths for any products that they might have, or frankly, they're on the market, right? If you got revenue, you're on the market, you've gotten through the approval gauntlet. And so we're looking to back entrepreneurs that have proven technologies, have been to the rodeo, done their, been there, done there, and gotten the t-shirt. And a couple examples, Vivex is a $70 million revenue business in Miami, right? We have products on the market we're selling today. We have really incredible opportunities of more, challenging products to get approved, but for future opportunities that are even bigger markets. We're in a company called Rapid Medical out of Israel is another example that's focused on stroke and aneurysm, on the market globally, just got their flagship products approved in the US. We'll be a 20 million run rate business end of this year. We're in another company that is a pioneer in regenerative medicine that sold a portfolio of their products to a now public company called Ozio, held some technologies back where we know the technology, we know the science, we've been investors in the space. We brought a CEO to the table there and helped reposition that company to kind of leverage their IP to grow from the base that they have. So we're kind of, again, growth equity guys. We're looking to back things that have a clear path to approval, clear path to markets. And, we're not people, again, in the life science space, as Daniella said, that are taking 5 to 7 year risk. We'd more be interested in the kind of things that she's doing, where it's like, look, somebody's got to ferment the product, somebody's got to manufacture the product, somebody's got to, to do the infrastructure side to get it to market. And these things are very complex products to make on that side of the house. We've looked at several of these investments in the infrastructure space. that people, again, they don't want to go invest in the CapEx, but somebody's got to build the infrastructure to get these products to market. And there's more of them every day going to trial. So that's the kind of stuff we like to play in, where there's very clear path to revenue, very clear path to market, where we can find a company at an inflection point, invest right, and then arbitrage the opportunity as it gets sold to somebody, either a strategic or we can take it public, and arbitrage the public market opportunity that's out there to get the the most efficient capital market in the world.
I couldn't have a healthcare panel without talking about Omicron, and I wanted to tell you that Omicron is the top cryptocurrency coin right now in the industry. On Friday, it started at $65. It went as high as $659. Before I came up here, it started plummeting to $359. It's still at $153. So what ended up happening is somebody forgot that there was a crypto coin for a whole bunch of people. And it's interesting because the next panel after us is cryptocurrency, but there's a negative to Omicron, and anybody who invested in cryptocurrency in Omicron on Friday, I think as of this morning, it was up 952%. So we'll end with something about COVID. Basically, 2 weeks ago, Pfizer said it expected 2021 sales of COVID-19 vaccine to reach 36 billion, and another 21 billion from the shot in 2022, topping analyst estimates for both years. COVID-19 vaccine development efforts have led to the growth of first contract manufacturing organizations, like you said, John, because of COVID and the vaccine. CMOs have piped up. Second, GCTSs, which are basically global gene and cell therapy markets, have come back again. They're projected to grow significantly between 2021 and 2026. Although there's only one drug currently approved by the US FDA to treat COVID, many medications are being tested. There's emergency authorization for an antiviral drug, 2 anti-inflammatory therapies, immune-based therapies, drugs to prevent COVID. But the most exciting drug is one that has already been approved in the UK. It's called the COVID-19 pill. It's developed by Merck, and people believe that this week, federal health regulators say that they will approve it. So we're not falling behind in COVID, we're really ahead. And I think to that, I'd like each of you to comment on where you feel the industrials, bye, John. Where you feel, because to be totally honest, we're sitting here open. This is my third conference in 2 weeks. I've had 33 PCR tests coming back and forth between Canada and the United States, and I've never had COVID. So there's plenty of us sitting in this audience that are moving forward, and people should not be scared of Omicron. We should realize what drugs we have that can help us and that could boost our immune system. So your comment on COVID, I guess, our COVID comments.
Well, I think everyone, at least in our field, we're certainly optimistic and cautiously optimistic that COVID, that Omicron will be similar to the Delta variant, in that it's not as serious. But regardless of that fact, I actually think I want to go back to one of Mary's points earlier, because I would challenge a little bit the platform negativity. I think in our space, in life science industrials, and I've seen this over time, there are really compelling platforms and applications of AI and machine learning, not just for clinical trials, but for discovery. And I would say, specifically, I would highlight one of our portfolio companies is New York-based Envisagenics. It's AI machine learning for RNA splicing errors. It is hot. 5 years ago, Envisagenics. Okay. It is a hot field, and it is absolutely transforming the discovery space in terms of identifying novel targets and identifying also biomarkers for clinical trials and more effective clinical trials for pharma. But I think, part of that is how you understand that landscape in depth, right? And, our depth as a fund is really specifically focused on life science industrials. We partner uniquely with groups like Pfizer, Lonza, JSR. There are strategic LPs. And what we're able to gain from those relationships are incredible insights from the processing, from the discovery, from the clinical trials, and what tools they need to really further their platforms. And we see just an incredible amount of technology focused also on supply chain, AI and machine learning platforms focused on supply chain and bioproduction. So those are kind of core to that. I think one of those issues relates to the supply chain problem of COVID, which is, you know, how do you scale effectively? How do you really get from the new variant vaccine or a pill, and you scale that not just for the US market, but for global markets? And you can see with the lack of access to vaccines in Africa and other regions, it is an issue and will be with us for quite some time.
I have a question. So it's kind of like just a inventory. So what do you think is going to stay the same as a result of COVID, and what's going to like flip back? Like a lot of changes are made, obviously, like telemedicine, for example, but there's a large telemedicine lawsuit going on, likely involving fraud that happened. You know, you talked about psychedelics and things like that. It's actually going to be big. You know?
I think the healthcare industry, just from a general, just so that you understand, to my right, I have a chemical engineer. To my left, I have a PhD in chemistry. So just to give you a little bit credit there, and you a little credit, Daniella founded Wave Biotech from her dorm room. She led the group to its first exit in 2007 to GE Healthcare. So she's been in life science industrials her entire life. And Marie, to my left, is a PhD in chemistry and still teaches chemistry and does due diligence on the pharma side. So you've got two brilliant women. I'm the dummy in the middle. So I'll just answer to an easy question here. I think what we've realized is healthcare is growing on either sides. We're taking away from the technology field. We're taking away from engineering. We're taking away. I think it's only going to build. I think
So there's no going back to the old practices.
I think we're always going to have telemedicine. We had telemedicine. People didn't attach themselves to it. I think people now realize that healthcare is also about mind and body. And I think I think we had a lot of mental illness during COVID because of isolation. And I think although we joke about psychedelics and we joke about cannabis and plant-based and telemedicine, it all helped the people. I think people are realizing that healthcare is not just the norm that we grew up thinking it was. It's not just basic medicine and INDs to FDA. So I think it's just going to grow. I think it might become the biggest sector.
Do you think there's an unintended consequence of COVID that now there's more healthcare consumers than ever before? Like,
I think it's important.
That was a trend. That was even a trend prior. I mean, if you look at the demographics
and you know,
I think
free vaccines and things like that.
I think what we realized was
people are aware of this stuff. So do you think there's going to be, you know, so if anything, it's that the consumption aspect is going to drive up price.
I mean, the more
going to be more people wanting it.
It's kind of linked to, I mean, I did a lot of this work at GE and the economics around that globally. You know, it's really linked to the growing middle class and the fact that growing middle class actually acquires much more in terms of healthcare services. And if you look at that globally, you'll see those trends.
Well,
So you're talking about the global middle class. I'm talking about the United States.
But you look at
people kind of didn't really take care of themselves too much now.
Just look at CPGs. Just walk into a CVS or any drugstore and you'll see a whole section now where there's health and wellness sections, where there's besides just going to the back end, there's all these health and wellness products. I think what we realized is the healthier people did better if they contacted COVID.
Sure. Marie and John, any perspective? I mean, to me, this COVID has driven people's awareness of disease and wellness, et cetera. And also that they're getting access to healthcare now that they probably ignored in the past. And it's a huge tiring trend as well.
I think
demand is going to rise dramatically.
I think one thing. I think one thing that I'll defer to John that he doesn't realize it. One of John's investments is Barry's boot camps, and that was fitness and wellness. And I think people realize that in this industry, we also need to add the fitness industry.
So my question is pricing. John, your thoughts? Do you think pricing is going to go up, or will be suppressed?
I mean, that's a big question, right? I mean, the payer, right? I mean, the payer's government largely, right? So everything, pegs off. I mean, actually not everything, that's not fair, but so much pegs off of CMS, right? And reimbursement rates out of CMS for Medicare reimbursements, whether that's any drug. We have, a bigger problem emerging, and I shouldn't say problem, but solution we're going to have to solve for these new curative therapies that are different than the old line therapies of like, hey, we're just going to put somebody on a drug and hope they stay on it for 50 years. That's the new game, is we're going to put somebody on a genetic disease protocol or a cancer therapy that's curative, but the cost of developing that drug and how you pay for it and how you value analyze what the government's willing to pay on a drug that may cost $1 million or $500,000 a dose. But when you get it, you're not going to have the disease anymore. Now, granted, there's a lot more promise there than there is delivery at this point, but we've got this whole paradigm change of how therapies in the future are going to work versus what the therapies are of the past. That's a big question. In terms of like your consumption question, I mean, we don't have all the time. We don't have enough time in 1,000 hours to talk about this consumption issue. People are probably more aware of healthcare, their own personal health, of the need to be mindful of their health today than ever before. In terms of pricing, the government's the ultimate cap on pricing. They're going to be the arbiter of what people pay, private insurance secondarily. But again, a lot of that's pegged off of Medicare and CMS. There's only so much money to go around, right? So, I mean, there are some caps on what the system can bear. But I think, look, we've got, we do have some, we're going to, I mean, look, we're all paying for it. We deficit fund in this country. So we're going to have to tackle these challenges across time. There's no question.
We have time for one more question.
We have a question.
Okay, two more questions.
So, first of all, thank you, because I think this is a very important topic. You're right, COVID has made some awful plans. So my question to you is this: as we're seeing these new drugs, the way they're developing them, biotech is changing, life science is changing, wellness is changing. Do you think we're going more to a model of personalized medicine? Because I think this methodology of just blasting people with a vaccine works for all. It doesn't work. Yeah. By the way, in most diseases, it doesn't work. It works for a percentage.
So the question is personalized medicine versus medicine for the masses. Thoughts?
I think for sure. I think with this biology, I think part of it, and to go around back to what you were asking in terms of telemedicine, a lot of these clinical trial companies that are doing AI design, an important part is telemedicine. So it's a little bit different, but they're using it, and they're using personalized biomarkers and technology that you carry in your phone, Apple, for example, to make it personalized. A little bit different than we used to call it personalized, but yeah.
Maybe I would build on that. I think certainly yes, personalized. If you think about the CAR T therapies currently approved, Novartis, Kymriah, Yescarta from Gilead, those two therapies cost upwards of $375,000 for one dose. It is curative, as mentioned before. They are highly personalized. They are not scalable. You cannot deliver those at any reasonable scale to a broader population. But what you can do is introduce some efficiencies in the process to ultimately arrive at a personalized medicine, but in a bit of a different way. Happy to.
Didn't Jimmy Carter have brain cancer and he had something like CAR T therapy and he's still alive, right? So
yeah, it's transformative.
And your question?
Blockchain, and where do you see blockchain in healthcare today? Where do you see it?
Blockchain and healthcare.
Well, in my side of the industry, which is the cannabis industry, blockchain has become where we've checked where illegal products come from GMP facilities. So it's been a huge part of the cannabis industry. It's been a huge part of the cannabis industry where people thought originally it was just to avert going through certain governments. It's become the barometer, basically the yardstick of my industry from going from one country to the other country. So it's become a huge part of it. But
any other comments?
I just want to end it on a positive note, because tomorrow is the FDA advisory committee for the Merck drug. And I just spent all weekend reading the documents. So there wasn't a lot of data released in it. I'd give it a thumbs up. So
Danielle, any thoughts?
Exciting, the most exciting 20 years ahead for us in life sciences. It's going to be incredible.
Fantastic. John?
Yeah, I just echo that. I mean, if you guys could see this day in, day out, whether, as we talked about, it's on the discovery side, what's being done with these databases to figure out how to, find and discover drugs more efficiently, it's going to totally compress the development timeline for drugs. When you understand how these drugs act within specific humans, as we talked about, with different genetic mutations, or with cancers that have a specific type of cancer that is going to be sequenced down to their specific mutation that they have, the level of customization and personalization of therapies to people is going to be mind-blowing. And what happens in this coming revolution, as Daniella said, it's the most exciting, space to be in. It's the most exciting thing to be a part of. And of course there'll be ebbs and flows, but I don't think anybody can comprehend, really, because of the rate of change that's going to happen, where this is headed. It's going to blow people's minds when we look back in 25 years and understand what's happened with the merger of kind of traditional thinking about healthcare and technology.
Fantastic, guys. Listen, thank you so much. We're still about 15 minutes behind, but we have a crypto panel, and so I need to get Dan Hughes, and I think we have all the crypto people are here, so we probably need to move an extra chair over from over here to get somebody a seat.
We're good.
I am. Nice to meet you. Okay. Hi, my dear. Sandra.
Where might you're gonna sit? Oh yeah, I'm here. You're gonna sit next to
People just walked in, so
so you'll be here.